Today we talk about starting a campaign. Frank.
Yes, Charles.
I finally started a campaign.
Charles, you started like 5 different campaigns in the last 2 weeks.
But this is different. I'm starting in a pub.
Isn't that just a tavern, but with a different name?
It's a pub.
Hello and welcome to What is Tabletop? My name's Frank, and I'm here with Charles, who's so new to tabletop gaming that he doesn't understand the cliche of starting in a tavern.
What if I start in a bar?
Unless it's a terrible line for a joke. No, don't be starting in a bar. Well, I mean, you can. We'll talk about it. We'll be talking about all the different ways you can start a campaign and all of the cliches and stuff like that. And so if you don't know what a cliche is, then don't worry. You're in good company because Charles doesn't either.
Nope.
Anyway, we hope that you like, comment, and subscribe as we talk about our videos. You can also join our Patreon, where we got some cool exclusive videos and other things there that you can enjoy. So link in the description.
Yeah, you can also check out our Discord, which our link will also be in the description for that.
Yeah, we got a lot of designers in there talking about the things they're designing, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, it's awesome. I love seeing the different ways that people think, and I love seeing our community grow and share those their ideas with each other.
One of them called us a gold mine because of the research they've been doing for their RPG. So,
oh, wow.
Thanks.
Thank you.
5-star review right there.
We appreciate that.
Yeah. So what are we talking about, Charles?
Today we're talking about how to start a campaign. So let's get into it. How do we start a campaign?
Yeah. So first of all, good idea of just going into it.
Yeah, let's get into it.
I honestly think there's a lot of people who have to overthink, how do I start this campaign? In actuality, it's just like, hey, get your group of friends together. You found the time to play. Just start it. Like, that's going to be the biggest tip we can give you, is just start. Like, most people are not going to care whether or not you're starting in a tavern or if this is a really interesting way to get the plot hook going and doing this and that.
So you're telling me starting in a tavern's not an original idea?
Oh, no, buddy. I should have researched this. I want to know where this idea of starting in a tavern came from. Because, like, in fantasy tropes, that's not really a thing.
Right.
I think it just is, it's this idea that, like, it's a very easy way to get like everyone into a central location. You can have everybody kind of role play a little bit. If you want to, you can have a brawl happen, like a tavern brawl happen. Right. Everyone gets to show off a little bit. There's a lot of stuff that can happen in the tavern, which is probably where this trope came from of starting in it. Just
like in real life, how bars and like coffee shops are a good social place. So it's a good place to, like you said, to kind of introduce your character, you know. And you could have multiple reasons to be there, like, you know, I just came out of an adventure, or, you know, I'm meeting up with someone, or, you know, I just wanted to get a drink, things like that, you know, or I need food. It's just one of the easier things, I guess, to meet over. There
are adventure modules where you just start in the tavern and then you go out and do the adventures and always come back to it. It's a nice central hub. There's nothing wrong with starting in a tavern, but if you're wanting some more inspiration on like some more interesting or unique ways that can really grip your players into immediately wanting to play, we're going to talk about that. Yeah. Because you can use this regardless of system, even though we're going to probably predominantly be talking about fantasy systems because that's what people Google, or I guess YouTube search. So we're going to go over a few different ways, including some examples that I have run, because as a person who has been doing this for over 10 years, you start a lot of campaigns. You start more campaigns than you finish, which shouldn't make sense, but the maths, I promise. It
definitely maths, because for me, only doing it a few times, every campaign I've started has not technically finished.
Right. So. It's in perpetual hiatus. Right. Right. It's still going eventually. Maybe. Yeah.
I got to finish my Kids on Bike one still.
Yeah. That Fallout campaign is definitely going to go on.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Yeah. All right. First one, we're going to be talking about tropes.
Yes.
Tropes, yes.
So this is obviously you're starting at a tavern. Now, what's interesting is I've tried looking up other tropes of starting a campaign, and really it's starting in a tavern is the big one. That's the one that everyone goes to. And I mean, we've already talked about why that is, but some people will start to say things like, oh, starting enslaved is a trope. And I'm like, really? Which is weird to me, because the second campaign I ever ran, that's how they started, they were all slaves. And it makes sense, right? It's an easy way to get them all together. You have a very obvious common enemy in the person who enslaved all of you, right? Yeah. Now, obviously, you might have some people who are not the biggest fans of slavery or this and that, and so that's kind of a particular thing that you want to be careful of being indentured. Yeah. There we go. Especially if some people are not comfortable with talking about that kind of stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. And there are other ways to get around that too. I know there are ways you can start it where you're in prison though, or
Right.
somehow you guys were arrested. Again, maybe you're arrested under false pretenses, or maybe you're actually
Right.
someone who belongs in
Yeah.
prison.
Another example is being on a ship,
Being on a ship, yeah.
being in the midst of traveling, right? If we think of Skyrim, you're awake, I see, right? Yeah, that's again the prison thing, but you're in a on a cart and you're all getting
you're being detained.
But here again, the reason why like a prison works just as well as a tavern works is because again, it's getting everybody there, and the reasoning you're all there could be different. You could have the person who committed a small crime, and so they're like, "Oh, I got thrown in here for dumb reasons," or you could have the person who committed a big crime and they're downplaying it to the rest of the party because they don't want them to be upset about it, right? There could be a few different ways that you can do that.
Another cool way would be like the Avengers Initiative, have a NPC meet up with these characters because there's specific set of skills warrant make them a good idea for a team of adventurers to go out to solve a problem for them.
Yeah, that's a big thing that you want to know is like however you start the campaign. This is another tip that you can use. Have a good reason why the party's together, because a lot of the times, especially if you watch a lot of actual plays, you'll see how like the party will just naturally come together over time. Like, oh, look, they all met in a tavern, but then they all became friends and now they're off adventuring together. And if you don't have a group that is able to kind of like force that kind of interaction to work, it's going to be awkward, and you're inevitably going to have the people who are like, well, why does my character go off with them?
Right.
Even though, like, arguably that should be on the players a little bit to think of a plot hook and a
Agreed.
plot reason that you should get everybody together. But yeah, that's the basic idea is like, if you can, as the GM running the system, come up with some sort of way to be able to get everybody together naturally and have a good reason why they're all sticking together, right? So like a prison is a great one because if you all break out of the prison, which naturally the players are going to want to do, there's a good reason to stick together because it's like, well, we're all on the run from the same group.
Absolutely, yes.
Yeah, and so let's just stick together because it's going to be better for all of us.
But typically you're going to want to find that string that connects your players. So whether that be them just meeting for the first time in a tavern, or again, it's even cool to have your players talk beforehand, like during session 0, to see maybe they know each other. You know, maybe they have background together. I always like the idea of playing like a friend or a sibling, if something like that, with one of my fellow players, because it's a different dynamic.
Yeah.
And playing off those things is a lot of fun. Again, you just look at Critical Role. Was it Vex and
Vex, yeah.
So I think that's a really neat concept.
Yeah, we had in our Fallout campaign, me and Zach Dunkerton intentionally were like, let's have our characters just join up, where like they were part of this previous Brotherhood group, and then we traveled together. And even though my character had the Brotherhood background and his was like more of a mercenary, it still worked out that we were able to make it work. If you are players, find the means to connect each other. Makes the GM's job a lot easier. To be able to be like, oh, I know who you are. I've heard about you before, right? Like if someone's a famous assassin or famous whatever, having someone else be like, I've heard of that guy. I've always wanted to work with him before. That could be a very interesting tagline there too.
Now the next thing is to how do we bring the players in? How do we grab their attention and keep them hooked on to the campaign and the story?
Yeah, so that's going to be the big thing is what is the hook driving the players in? And honestly, the hook just needs to be the initial thing, and the rest of it can be figured out on its own. So I've done this a few times with my campaigns. The first ever campaign I did, I had all of the players receive a letter from this big rich noble. And I just said, you have a letter that tells you to meet him at this island. Are you going, like, how you got the letter is up to you. And so what's fun is if you have players like we usually do who really like having a backstory that people don't know about and it gets revealed over the course of the campaign. What this does is it gives you something to hold on to, but you can reveal really early on. So like you can have the person who's like, yes, I was sought after specifically to get this letter. I was given it personally. This is my letter. Versus the someone who's like, I stole it off a guy. I don't know. It just seemed like a lot of money. Or I found it in a book and I don't even know why it was in that book. That was 3 of the examples that were given in my old my first one shot, and I liked that so much that I used it for this most recent campaign we started, where I was like, you guys are being invited because this big event's about to happen, and this master who had done the event 4 times is looking for her own group of compatriots to now push and run the event. And I was just like, you guys get the letter. How do you get it? And I think every single one of you was like, I was not given the letter. It was for someone else, which I think is really funny.
Yeah. Well, mine was definitely like, I think how we worked mine out, because my character's an assassin,
Right.
was like they knew I was going to be attacking a target, so they had somehow given it to my target. So I naturally, like, whenever I had taken out the target, I had my invitation. Like, it was for me. It was just on my target.
Right, and that's a really cool way, because again, Charles is playing an assassin. So how can I make Charles feel unique and interesting? Where it's like, oh, you find the letter already addressed to you on the body of a person you just killed, and it's like, that's like intriguing enough for your character to be able to go in. We had Evan, whose character was like, it was given to his master, but his master's not doing well, is like feeling sick and ill, so he gave it to Evan, who's his apprentice. That was an easy one right there for sure. I think we also had the same thing with a few others, but I don't want to say too much because they haven't been revealed in game. But it's a really fun thing. It gets your players to be able to think about something going forward, while at the same time, allowing for the plot to still work together. Like, you have this common goal, at least at the beginning. And so the way our campaign is working is, even if the group doesn't end up getting the master's favor, you guys are still going to be able to be like, well, okay, that's fine. We're just going to go off as this already formed team and start working towards this event. But again, the big thing is, you guys ahead of time, I told you, we're doing the labyrinth run. We're doing this big event. You guys have to have characters that want to do that. Yeah. And so that comes on the players a little bit, like, come up with a reason why your character wants to go through this thing. And again, that's good to be able to have those kind of parameters a little bit.
I love, like, having a common goal. You have that hook. And again, there's so many ways you can do it too. And I like that as a GM, you were like, this is the setup. Yeah. How do you guys want to get there? Like, how are you a part of this? What's your reason for being there? And I like that you put it on us players, because it gives us a little bit more freedom and flexibility to be like, oh, why am I here? Like, so, and I liked coming up with like, oh, here's my character background. This is clearly why I'm here. But which it would behoove me, knowing, even as an assassin, to work with others, because it would allow me to get close to my targets.
Yeah. And so, like, if we're going off the Avengers example from a little earlier, we can say you can have an ancient evil get unearthed, and it's like, well, I was waiting for such a time as to call all of you together, and now is that time. And so maybe that ancient evil isn't that big of a deal, like they defeated by level like 3, but it still starts the group together, and now they have more common goals. Ideally, what would happen is you have just like that first little hook that gets them going, and then from there they have developed enough plot threads, whether from their backstories or from just natural things occurring, that you're going to be able to naturally be able to move from one thing to the other, one story point to the next.
I just like the idea of having that flexibility with your friends to go off and do something. Like, say, even if we're beating the ancient evil by level 3, something else, again, there's always a domino effect.
Again, just have that big hook that's going to get everybody interested in why their players are, or why their characters are going that way. And yeah, that's really like the big thing you have to do.
So you had something written in Latin for me.
Yes, in media res. This one is a fun one. Basically what it means is get rid of all the gobbledygook and just have them start in the middle of the action.
Yeah.
If you watch our Avatar one shot, you will actually see that happening, where we start literally right as the distraction team starts their distraction. Right. It's literally like you guys are ready to camp out, and the bold is now doing something crazy, and the combat has begun immediately. This is going to be good for just getting into the middle of it. It really shows off the characters immediately, especially if it's a combat driven system where it just shows off like, here's the thing I can do really well. Here's what I can do unique and different. You can have a lot of different ways where this happens. You can have like, you're all protecting a cart and it just got attacked by bandits. And it's like, okay, now we start attacking, now we start fighting together, and it's like, oh, as we're doing this, like maybe we are seeing what's like happening, like, oh, this is the first time we're all fighting together, and oh, we're able to do some moves and stuff like that. Ultimately, like, just starting in the middle of the action just gets rid of a lot of the awkward monotony, because especially if you have players who are just wanting to be there for the combat, starting in a tavern where you're like, all right guys, mingle a little bit, it's like, okay, and then you have this whole like, well, why are we together? Starting in the middle, you're like, no. We've skipped all of that. We've agreed. You're all caravan mercenaries. You're in the middle of the action. Start doing the thing.
Yeah, and again, like you said, for a combat system, that's probably one of the best ways to actually start off a campaign, is in the middle of combat, because you get to see the combat, you get to see how your fellow players interact with that combat. And that later, and then you can always like do flashbacks, and like, oh, here's actually how me and this character met. And maybe it's not because but at the time, at the beginning of the campaign, it's not relevant because somehow something brought you all together. Again, no one knows the specifics you can figure that out later.
And again, it doesn't have to be combat. It could be a heist. You could be in the middle, right? If we're thinking
Right.
of Blades in the Dark, especially since Blades in the Dark has a flashback system, you could just start in the middle of the heist. Like you've already done all the planning. You're just going into it immediately.
That would be fun.
And that could be a very interesting thing too, especially if it's like, oh, this is our first heist as a group. So like we're still kind of figuring it out and like how do we work to get well together? And then that's when you can have the flashbacks and stuff like that,
Right.
which I think could be a really fun way to integrate that in there. But just starting immediately off with the thing that everybody wants to do, nothing wrong with that. And then again, having this is a little bit more on the GM, but having something happen in that first round of combat or during that heist that then again hooks the players, right? So if you're mercenaries protecting a caravan, maybe they get away with the package and it's like, well, if we don't get that package, we don't get paid. Or maybe you're in the middle of the heist, but then an enemy team gets there just before you, and now you have to deal with the guards, but they also stole the thing that you wanted. So now you have to figure out, okay, now we got to plan our next heist against those guys. So just having something that goes wrong or that just seems a little off to where the immediate next step is obvious.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great way to, again, introduce your players and other people to the system. Again, is through what is the system known for? If it's combat, use combat. Like you said, if it's if it's a heist-based system, use that. Anything that gets your characters directly involved, like the players directly involved in what's happening, because you're at that point you're going to be really invested in what you're doing.
Yeah. Now, obviously, if your group is more roleplay heavy, there's nothing wrong with not starting in the middle of the action and having it be more of a slow burn kind of a thing. If you're able to, you could even have like one-on-one, sessions with people where it's like we were talking about before, having those shared backstories already.
Right.
You could have that if you have the time, which not everybody does. It's a little easier said than done to be able to do that. But having these connections already formed could be cool. And then like the slow building of like, oh, naturally we became a team this way. That makes a lot better sense for a story. But again, it's more dependent on your play group than anything else.
That was an excellent segue to our next point, personal stories.
It's another way to hook somebody is find something in their backstory and then immediately hook them, right? Now it could be something as simple as like we flash back to the moment where like you saw your parents being assassinated and the glowing red eyes of somebody, and now that the city's being attacked, you see those same glowing eyes and you're going to go after them, right? This would require a little bit more work on the GM's part to be able to like stitch things together. But again, having something that connects everybody, like, wait, there was a glowing creature with red eyes that from your backstory, it's in my backstory too. Okay, clearly we got something we got to go after. Conversely, you can always have one player be the catalyst. So it's like we talk about like prophecies and divine revelations, right? As a story trope, but it's harder to do that in RPGs because you don't get to control how the outcome of things happen.
Right.
So there is a way to do it without it feeling forced. So you can have like a very vague concept of like, you see creatures from the sky and creatures from below fighting. And so like naturally maybe the players start thinking, oh, angels versus demons. But then as the story goes on, you start to realize, oh no, we have the people from the mountains versus the people from the valley. Oh, that's the vision I saw, right?
Right.
And so you can have like a vision that starts getting everybody together. And then again, if those people have, foresight and stuff like that, they can literally go up to someone and be like, I saw you in my prophecy. We're supposed to work together. Yeah. I don't know about why. I just know that there's this really important thing that's going to happen that involves us.
That could be a really fun way to, get your other players. If you put that on one player, convince it, having them try to convince that other player. Again, you don't have to roll for it. You can just straight up role play it, obviously.
Yeah.
Especially when it comes to other players. But yeah, that needs to be. If another one of the players came to me and their character was like, "Hey, you were in a vision of mine." Depending on my character, my background, I'm like, oh, am I someone who's going to believe this person? Is it going to take some convincing? Like, how will I deal with the situation?
Yeah. Now, obviously, the downside of this kind of a way to start a campaign is you need a player who's not going to abuse it or is going to be able to use it well. So this would be great for like if you have a bunch of new players except one. And so you can have the one veteran player kind of be the one who has like this prophecy and it gets everybody together, especially if you know that those new players like that kind of a trope. You want to be careful to not put it on to one specific person who's going to maybe abuse it or be like, oh, I know for sure we're going to win because I saw a prophecy that said that. So you can't die. And again, that's where this kind of stuff comes awkward is like, what happens if it's like, oh, I saw a vision of us together. Oh, but your character died. Well, I guess I also saw the prophecy of your new character. Yeah, and so this is where like keeping it vague,
yes,
can be very, very useful for sure.
I think prophecies, when you're using that kind of idea in your game, you need to keep it vague. And I think it's important that you let the players also try to interpret their own way. You as the GM might like, this is actually what it means, and then you can have that revealed over time. But let them interpret it while they're going through it. Because again, let them make their mistakes or make their realizations. Because I know as a player, it's really fun when you start making connections to like connecting with it. Like, oh, I think this is what the GM wants. And sometimes you're right. Sometimes you're wrong.
Yep. If you want us to, let us know. We can have a video kind of talking about like future stuff and prophecies and stuff like that and how you can make it work in your own game. It's a lot both easier and harder than you think it is. So if you're interested in that, we'll have our own video.
Are there any other ways we can probably get a campaign to start? Because again, I think we've got a lot of good ideas, but there's so many ways to do this.
Yeah. So going back to it, right? We talked about secrets and how like having a letter is a great way to have a secret and, allowing the players to be able to use that. Literally going to your players and being like, you have a secret. What is it?
Yeah.
Is a really good and interesting plot hook for them. And then you're also able to maybe tie it in immediately, maybe not. So for example, we had a player who had a god that he was worshiping.
Yeah.
And I was just like, cool. And he's like, well, here's my whole backstory, this and that. I'm like, cool. Are you okay if I change some things? And he's like, yeah. I'm like, okay. And so the god I ended up having be an evil god pretending to be someone else. Okay. And so what ended up happening was a TPK on the first session where the entire party was killed because I didn't know how to balance things because I found this monster and I was like, oh, it's CR like 1/4. They'll be fine. It was not. And so what ended up happening is as the group starts dying, this cleric yells out to his god. He's like, can you save us? And knowing that it was the god of murder, I was like, oh, perfect. So I just went from being upset that I'm like unintentionally killing all my players to being like, no, this is the new interesting plot hook that I can do. I'm going to have them all die and then wake up in pools of blood at the end of the session and be like, here's your new task. You are all working for the god of murder. If you play it off well, they might be like, that was such a cool idea to have us just like start this campaign as like these now servants of a evil god. How are we going to make that work? If you don't hide it well, then it's fine because everyone's like, oh, it's fine. We get to keep playing the characters we want to play.
I guess
so okay.
That brings me to my question. Did you let that player know that when you said, could I change some things, did you tell them to change or did you let that naturally happen?
It was going to naturally happen. And then obviously first session that happened. So he figured it out pretty quickly.
Okay. Very cool.
It was going to be a slow burn that I ended up using as some sort of tool later on. And so sometimes you might want like a player's secret to be revealed a lot earlier because then it's going to be able to get the ball rolling and get the story moving a little bit quicker and in a little more interesting way. The way they talk about it in like writing books is if you have a really interesting thing to be writing about, start there. Like start immediately where the interesting part is. Don't feel like you have to give all this backstory and like leading up to it and be like, you have to understand that the elves and the dwarves were going to war with each other. It's like, no. Who cares if the book starts with, here's a half dwarven elven child who now has to work between these two worlds. Like if that's the interesting part, start with the interesting part. So if you have this idea for a campaign where it's like, and then halfway through the campaign, it turns out that they were working for the bad guy the whole time. Have that happen in like the first the session where it's like you're going to work, you're about to complete this task, you're all level 5 and you're about to defeat the evil one. Oh no, you actually unleashed the evil one instead. It gives them a more personal stakes and a personal story that now it's like, oh, this is evil is here not just because it happens to be, it's because we unleashed it.
You know, I was after all this talking, I thought of like, another cool way to start a campaign would be at the end. Start with like the big bad, like you guys are there, you guys are whatever levels you are, and then maybe even have a little bit of combat, give them that taste of like the high level combat, and then something happens, and then you flash back to level like 4 or something, and then you kind of see how
with
they
the
get
hindsight of knowing they lose at the end.
Yeah,
that's an interesting way to do it. You could also have it be the inverse, where you're like, if you like this idea of like the Dark One ruling over being your setting, having that first session be the heroes who should have stopped the Dark One and lost, and now you're picking up the pieces from like hundreds of years later as the people who heard the stories of the people who tried to overthrow the Dark Lord and failed, and how maybe that inspires them a little bit. But again, the big thing there is you want to have characters who are then going to want to defeat the Dark Lord, right?
Right.
I had an evil campaign where basically something like that happened, and I told the players up front, I'm like, you will have to have characters that are okay with overthrowing the Dark Lord. I don't want all of you guys to have like complacency characters where they're like,
Right.
oh, we're kind of okay with things happening. Maybe if the circumstances, I'm like, no. We need to say up front, this is the goal. This is the idea. You're going there. Can your characters be a little bit morally complex? Absolutely. But you need to have that goal in mind, right?
Right.
And again, maybe that's the last tip we're going to talk about is like it's okay to tell them ahead of time, like, this is the end goal of the campaign. This is when we reach this point, we stop, because it helps the players to create characters that are like, okay, if that's the end goal, how can I tie my character into reaching that end goal?
Basically, you have so many ways you can start a campaign. What are some ideas you guys have? What are some ways you start your campaign? You know, I know we didn't list all of them.
And let us know in the comments if you have any more tips or tricks that you want to let other people know. Let us know. And as always, you can watch more of our videos on YouTube, join our Discord, and our Patreon. And I think that's it. We don't really know how to end things. We just know how to start them. So
Right.
I think this is where we end. It was nice working with you. Stay witty.
Stay witty.